Hey folks, thanks for stopping by. This is my newest monthly Q&A where I take your questions and talk about things that I normally wouldn't have a chance to maybe dive into as much on my regular videos. I love these. These are so much fun. Thank you for your questions. If you're new here, I take questions from the previous month's Q&A video comment section. So essentially in this comment section, drop questions that you want me to answer for the next month. I also take questions from YouTube membership and Patreon backers. Thank you guys for having my back. You get early access to this video. You've seen a draft of it at this point. Now, with all that being said, all that housekeeping out of the way, let's jump into the first question. This is from Paris, who says, you seem to be into all the same nerdy, geeky stuff that I am. Is there any big franchises that you've never gotten into or liked? Yes, I'm starting out with this one because now everybody's just gonna click off the video and leave, but I couldn't get into Game of Thrones, which is wild. It's so weird for me because I watched the whole first season of the show. I thought it was really good. Then I eventually even picked up the first book and read most of that. I think I finished it. And I enjoyed that as well. And then after that, I guess I just got carried away with too many other things that I just never dove full into the series. And it seems like people really, really like the show. I know some people that lose their minds for this stuff like it is up there with like a Star Wars, a Lord of the Rings, anything like that. And I feel kind of left out, but at the same time, I also feel like, okay, like a sigh of relief where there's like one thing where I don't feel like I need to know every single thing about it, because that's how I tend to go into these things. So the fact that I'm not into Game of Thrones means I can actually have a little extra hard drive space in my brain that isn't filled up with like, who are the Starks? What are the Lannisters doing? Blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Again, that's literally all I know. There's a dragon. There are multiple dragons. Ugh, I'm really embarrassing myself. But yeah, that's my one thing, really. Evan Mullen asks an interesting question. Do you ever worry or think about a media giant branching out into your niche? Like if the New York Times started making gaming videos or reviews on YouTube, what would you do, if anything? I wouldn't do anything. There's not really anything I can do. I think a lot of creators would like to take that opportunity to try and tear them down and smear them and get a lot of good internet points on the negativity and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if that were to happen, I just look at it as like competition. You know, all the major outlets, all the major corporations do have a hand in gaming some way or another. Now, doing YouTube video reviews, I'd be curious to see what that's like. I think there's value in all kinds of perspectives, big and small, but on like the corporate side, I think corporate media has bought their way into YouTube and really gaming coverage a lot more than people realize. Just look into like who owns what company and stuff like that. But I think after a while, you just gotta like hang back and welcome more people coming into the thing, more competition, more eyeballs, more excitement, more perspectives. That's really it. I've also been doing this a while where I feel like some people would go, no, they can't come here. Like, but that's, dude, like if I like freaked out or if I got upset at like every new video game YouTube reviewery type talker person on the block, I would be blue in the face. It's not worth it. Jordan D says, I've heard you say recently that you've read lots of Batman comics over the years. Have you read any recently that you would recommend? If not, what are some of your favorite Batman comics? So I think I've dived into a lot some of my favorite Batman books, but I just reread The Three Jokers because I forgot if I had even read it or not, but thank you to my friend Jimmy for recommending me that. The Three Jokers is cool. Honestly, for Batman recently, that's it. I did pick up some things because I never read The Batman Who Laughs, so I'm looking forward to diving into that. What I can say, or really recommend to people, because my all-time favorites are a lot of the mainstream all-time favorites. Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Dark Knight Returns, Year One, stuff like that. I gotta say though, if you, I got it. Like this is a hot take, but I think if you watch those DC animated versions of these things, like if you watch the DC animated Year One or the DC animated Long Halloween, the DC animated Dark Knight Returns, any of that stuff. If you watched any of that stuff, I am begging you. I'm gonna come off like an insufferable, annoying comic nerd. I am begging you to go read the actual things. People always think I'm crazy that I'm not into the Batman animated adaptations of the graphic novels. I like DC animated as a whole, but those direct adaptations of those specific, very special, very classic graphic novels, I think they don't capture the vibe or the spirit anywhere near as good as the books. Now, I sound like that guy who's like, oh, you read the book, it's better. It's not really that. It definitely represents it, but it just, you don't get the same feel. And I think so many people are missing out on that. And it upsets me. That's, again, I'm being annoying, but yeah. James Sweet says, I've heard you refer to yourself as a stuff goblin. That's what I call myself because I just like things. I hate to say it. I live my life around like, oh, what's the next thing I'm going to get? Or I'm going to buy that action figure, or I'm saving up for a cool new cell phone or a laptop. Like that's just, so I call myself a stuff goblin. So James says, what are your favorite gaming or pop culture possessions? One off the top of my head that I'm very happy with. So I have a decent Batman collection that I'm very proud of. One day I'll share that a little bit. Figures more than statues. I've talked a lot about my Metal Gear Solid collection, which I would like to share one day fully. I have a shit ton of Metal Gear memorabilia. But a gaming possession that I really value is I have a Witcher 3 Geralt statue that was only given to people who were able to see the game previewed the first year at E3. So I got to see like a very early version of the game. It was like my first or second E3, something like that. I sat down at the presentation. I sat down next to Angry Joe and I was like, oh my God, hi Angry Joe. Like, but for checking out the game, you got this free, cool little statue and it looks like it's like made out of stone. It's just plastic, but anytime people see it, they go, what is that? Where did you get that? And as far as I know, you can't get it anywhere. So it feels like this cool, rare thing to me, and it makes me happy. I caught my cat chewing on it, and I freaked out. Cats, man. Gotta love them. And Paul Fisher asks, deep thought time, do you think the discourse around gaming has become far more toxic than, say, 10, 20 years ago? And if so, what do you think is to blame? I think the real blame is just more people have a voice now. So yeah, you hear more. I kind of, granted, there are problems with video games worth complaining about that weren't around 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So that's part of it. But I think the big part is that everybody has a mouthpiece. Everybody can talk about gaming. Everyone can celebrate gaming. Everyone can bitch about gaming, regardless of even like, you know, what their level of communication even is. It's the Wild West. It's also, I liken it to politics too, where politics and people have, it's always been bad. It's always been real bad. But I think now in this time period, you're just like hyper aware of the specific ways and thoughts that people feel. And it could be a lot. I think gaming is similar. It's a mix of that and the fact that there is more stuff to complain about now. But I'm actively trying to work, but like by everything I do, I'm trying to kind of work against that and trying to be constructive about it all. Double Z asks, finally, are you a sneakerhead? If so, what are some of your favorite sneakers that you have? So right now I'm wearing the Wave Runners, even though I feel a little conflicted about that whole thing. I love Jordans, I love ones. My favorites of those are, I have the Royals, I have the Spider-Man ones, the origin story ones, you know, the ones from Into the Spider-Verse. My other favorites are the Rubik's Cube Pumas. I have Ripley's shoes, the Reeboks from Aliens, which I'm very proud of those. Then I just like older, chunkier shoes. I love high tops, always. I have like a vintage pair of Puma Sky 2 LX, which they are insane. I love them. I don't wear them all the time, but they're really cool. And I like some of the shoes that like they aren't hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Like those sick ass 80s, 90s style Pumas I found were like $50 on eBay, and they're hard to find, but nobody cared about them, so I bought them. I like bright, bold, colorful on my feet. I don't really stick to any particular brand. I'm also good for the occasional pair of checkerboard Vans. You know, I'm well-rounded, but Jordans are my main daily drivers. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. El Del Cuchillo asks, do you think a 10 out of 10 game even exists? If so, do you think they can be a 10 out of 10 in day one? I work as a QA tester and I'm baffled with all the praise Elden Ring had when the game obviously has its issues. I do like From Software games, spent tons of hours playing them, but I still can't see Elden Ring being a 10 out of 10. Am I missing something? So to be fair, like I don't care. Like I don't, and I don't mean like to be dismissive or anything. I just don't hang my hat on a 10 out of 10. I think it means nothing because I think it all comes down to the individual person. And I think that there are so many factors So for example, like just you as an example, like you don't think Elden Ring is a 10 out of 10, and you're basing that seemingly on technical issues, which warranted. The PC version is still iffy on Elden Ring. So the problem is it's like the creation, the thing, and the product, right? So some people might think the product aspect of it might not be a 10 out of 10, but then the actual thing itself that they crafted is. Like, so it really, does that make sense? It can go anywhere. Like, it could literally be, like, the game created could be the most perfect game made by God. Amazing, flawless, perfect story, perfect gameplay, endless, anything you want, 10 out of 10, but then it's got a bad frame rate, and sometimes it crashes. So then, like, you know, then that technically for some people would make it not a 10 out of 10. So I just have trouble, and my videos, you'll notice this sometimes, I only talk about the technical stuff if it's really, really significant, is that, like, it's getting more and more complicated. Everybody's playing on a different thing, especially with PC hardware. So, like, I think there's a conversation to be held there with, like, the actual product and the experience. But then also, like, I do also think there's no 10 out of 10 perfect game, because I think every game has a little something that you might not totally be happy with, or one little thing you wish there was more of. It's really just a long way of me saying I don't believe in review scores. I don't like numbered scores. I think it's just a point of arguing more than anything. But yeah, that was a really good question. I feel like I could make a whole video about that. So thanks, dude. Fabrizio says, big fan of the vids. What would you say is your favorite period for video games? So I've been playing since, so I had an NES, and then from an NES, like I had an NES, but it wasn't because I was from that time period. It was because I didn't have a lot of money. So then I went from NES, and then I eventually just finally got a PlayStation 1. And then from there, I went forward, kind of bouncing back and forth between all the brands and stuff like that. I gotta say, I think PlayStation 2 just felt like such a goddamn great time to be alive. So many games, so many weird games, so many mid-tier games, so many interesting games, smaller budget, big budget, legendary titles that people still talk about today. I think like the PS2 era kind of like made shockwaves, really, for gaming in general. Not just like Sony or like PlayStation, but just gaming in general. There's so much there that we still look back to. Really, I still personally look back to. So that's mine. Oh, here's a good one. Shrimp says, are you happy with what GameRanks is now? I find the videos to be without any imagination or creativity whatsoever. Basically, the Watch Mojo of video games. Blah, 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 like, you know, insert random title. Are you actually happy and excited about making these videos? So I'm only a small part of GameRanks at this point. I helped kickstart the channel, but now I'm kind of just a cog, a worker. And I think that criticism is valid because, you know, some people just don't like top 10s. That's a thing. And I don't think that makes us bad or makes that content bad. And there's a bunch of other stuff on the channel. So like the Friday news show is something that I work and put a lot of pride into. I also work on the Before You Buys, put a lot of pride into that. People come to those. I know plenty of people that just watch GameRanks for Falcon, or they just watch GameRanks for the Before You Buys and they skip other stuff. Some people, clearly, like a bunch of people just come in for the top 10s. So I get it. I get why you might not click on the top 10s or anything like that. All I can say, at least, is if you think it's creatively or without imagination, there's a lot of effort put in. And I think there's a lot more effort sometimes in terms of just like the thought process behind it or how things are said than some of the other big channels where it's just a very corporate man reading script where it sounds very much like he's just a paid voice actor guy. You know what I mean? Sheep N7, a YouTube member, backer, thank you, says, what do you think they should do with the Tony Hawk games? Keep remaking them or maybe work on something new? Personally, I'd love to see an Underground 3. Yeah, I actually think an Underground reboot or just a new spiritual successor to Underground could be cool because it has those adventure elements, the create your own character elements, the story elements, the exploration elements even. I think that is an excellent move for them to like do a new thing. On the other hand, I would like to see what they did to Tony Hawk 1 and 2 to Tony Hawk 3 and 4. Very, very much. Honestly, at this point, it's like, I'll take what I can get. I think the fact that 1 and 2 came out and was so good for someone like me, like I die for those games. I play them obsessively ever since, even the dry periods. Like, I'll take what I can get, honestly. And if they just do that, that's fine. But a new Underground would be really sick. I also say that as somebody who's had this poster behind me, so clearly I'm biased. Suspicious Scout says, do you think that games that had significant changes or content updates since launch should get more attention attention, given the current environment of games being projects that evolve over time rather than being a one and done deal. I often feel some games don't get the attention they deserve after what gets added. I do agree, and I think me talking about games here and Game Ranks and many places have a hard time with this because it ultimately comes down to like people are always gonna click on so like just like a broad example, people will always click on the article, the news article with the wrong information that they got it wrong and everybody freaks out. And then the next day that website issues a retraction and says, actually, we got the facts wrong. Here's the real story. That second story never gets anywhere near as much attention. And I think the same goes with games in terms of, here's the game, it's out. This is what it is. And then after the fact, when the game either improves or gets like a new expansion or a new update or a significant overhaul, that stuff is much harder to bring eyes to. And it's something that we talk about in our videos and in my videos, is just like how to approach that, because more and more that's happening. And I don't mean necessarily it's just games are releasing shitty and then they get better later. I'm talking about also games that are just, the model is it's put out and it just evolves over time, like say a Destiny or an MMO or something like that. So it's tricky. We're working on it, but I've tried it in the past here and there with stuff like No Man's Sky, Battlefront 2, of course. But it's definitely something that is a tough nut to crack in terms of putting stuff out there and getting people interested in watching. Steven Russo on Patreon, thanks for having my back. He says, microtransactions and internet connection required issues aside, I think the biggest complaint I have for Gran Turismo 7 is basically it's the same cars as in GT Sport. So I did struggle making the video and talking about the game just because I didn't play much of the last one. So I think for the hardcore people that embrace every single one, it sounds like that could be a shortcoming, the car stuff. But I would also just like to take this opportunity to soapbox real quick for Gran Turismo 7, put out the before you buy. I mentioned both the online always thing potentially being a problem, and I also talked about the microtransactions and how they were pretty egregious. And not really a big response to that. A lot of people were like, relax, Jake, it's not that bad. Like a lot of people dismissed it, or people just didn't care and just wanted to talk about how they thought the graphics weren't good. Either the graphics actually were pretty decent and blah, 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 blah. That went on. That was like a couple of days after release. But then the news cycle went on, and then more articles and more YouTubers started calling attention to the microtransactions and all that stuff. And then it became this big thing where everybody hated Gran Turismo 7. There was like a gap of like a week. And then all these other YouTubers were like, Gran Turismo 7 fucked up again. And I was like, I said it. I said the microtransactions were gross, you know? It's just interesting how that cycle worked, where it was like a lull, and then it was almost like as more people started playing it and realizing it wasn't great, coupled with the fact that like it was down for a period of time because of the always online thing. It's just no bueno all around. Matthew Johnson asks, when you are playing or reviewing a game pre-release, do you talk to your peers about your experience, like pros and cons, story moments, strategies, etc.? Also, after you finish posting your content, what creators do you often turn to first to hear their thoughts? Yeah, so after I finish playing a game and like I put out my video and everything, I always go right to ACG and Skill Up. People, the two main guys who, when you search a game, they usually pop up. Colleagues, very good at their jobs. Always go to seek them out. And then I read all the reviews from all the major publications. I like all the different perspectives. They're always all over the place, all over the spectrum for the most part. And that's just what I do. It's also like, because I've been doing it forever. I've done it from magazines to now. And to go back to the first point, when I'm playing a game pre-release, I usually lone wolf it and don't talk to a lot of people. I have like friendly colleagues and stuff, but I'm never usually up anyone's ass. I'm not really like a texter. But that being said, I did kind of fall into a group a little bit more recently, and it has been nice, especially with Elden Ring. In particular, actually, Skill Up, friend of the show, saved my ass with a little tip in Elden Ring where I hit a complete wall, and he was just like, oh, go do that, mate. And then I was like, oh, okay, and totally saved my ass. And then I was able to go hours and hours forward after that roadblock. So thank you. Woo, but that's where I'm at. Thank you guys for those questions. That was a fun one. I feel like we should do like a fireside chat thing. Like we should do it like by the fire. I would get a fire code violation and get like arrested or something. But hey, thank you guys if you sat around chatting with me. I appreciate it. I love making these videos. And like I said, if you want me to answer your question in the next Q&A video, drop your questions down there. thanks for having my back. Thanks to Patreon and YouTube members for having my back as well. I very much appreciate it. And if you like what I'm doing here, you know my spiel. I just like talking about stuff I love. And if you appreciate that, clicking the like button legit helps me. But thank you for sticking around here. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.